This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. Fucking A, why can't I say this word anymore? What the fuck is happening to me? I just have a seizure every time I say analytical now.
Dude, if you don't use that as the intro, you're failing at your job. That has to be
I have
it.
to use it. At least for this season. I have to conclude this season using it. You know what it is? It's analytical. That's what it is.
No. You're misinterpreting what I'm saying.
What?
I'm saying you have to use what you just did as the fake intro. It'll catch everybody off guard, and it'll be the best way to lead into this episode.
Oh yeah, that's true. Fuck, that's hilarious. Yeah, dude, that's really funny. That's a great intro. I didn't even think of that for some reason.
Yeah. Fuck.
This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, he is my brilliant co-host, Geoff. Geoff, how you doing today? It's a pretty good day over here on my side. How you doing?
It's good over here, too. I'm internally still laughing at your botched intro. So sorry to the people. I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk some basketball with you. What do you got on in store for us today?
Well, I mean, and everybody should be up to speed on what you're referencing right now, Geoff. I just had a very genuine emotional moment trying to do our intro. What I have on our end is to start by talking about Donte DiVincenzo. Where else would we start talking about the Knicks and kind of recent experiences with our New York Knicks, but Donte DiVincenzo? Donte DiVincenzo goes 11 for 20 from three against the Pistons, drops 40 points. But I want to kind of take a step back and talk about the bigger picture. I'm going to say something here. I think I know what your reaction is going to be, which I think it's going to be like, yeah, of course, obviously, but it probably sounds like a big claim. Donte DiVincenzo is having the greatest shooting season ever for a New York Knick, and I don't think it's close. It's easy to forget that he's averaging 27 minutes per game, which is, I don't know if that's less than the average starter, but it's definitely not in the upper echelon of starters. He started off the season not really playing much. And also, he was very cold from three, which is kind of funny to think about. I just looked back at it right before we jumped on the pod. He hit 15 of his first 47 three-point attempts as a Knick for a cool 32% over his first 11 games. And I don't know if you recall this, Geoff, but in one of our early pods, I had mentioned how my fiance hated Donte DiVincenzo. I had this issue, which is that my fiance hates Donte DiVincenzo. And I need a big DiVincenzo game, because literally every time she looks, so she'll passively kind of watch the game next to me, and she'll read or do something else, but she's also kind of taking in the game a little bit. And every time she looks at the screen, he's has a turnover. Yeah, he's missing an open three. And she's just who is this new guy that they got? He's terrible. And I'm no, he's really good. Trust me. Part of it was because she loved Obi Toppin, and, he's such a great person and good with the kids and exciting to watch. And then
you're not influencing this at all, by the way. There's no way she's at all
no,
she's at all no.
Whatever do you mean?
She definitely doesn't. She definitely doesn't love Obi because of you. She's independently arriving.
We're gonna have her on. We're gonna have her on at some point, because she will tell you that I did not influence this at all. We haven't really watched a basketball game together, which is kind of funny. We will do that at some point coming up, which, spoiler alert, that's going to happen on camera at some point. But
my face was just so ridiculous. I thought you were saying you and your fiance hadn't watched a basketball game together. I was like, what the fuck are you guys doing over there? What kind of marriage is this going to be?
We watch in different rooms. She goes in our bedroom, and I go in the living room.
Fan or whatever. He was like, "Get away from! You can't watch with me."
Yeah, exactly.
But yes,
that's our relationship.
We have not watched a basketball.
You and I, Geoff, have not watched a Knicks game together. But yes, I did not influence this. When I watch basketball games, I'm very stoic up until the end, probably when it gets really crunch time, or something really dumb happens that just frustrates me. If something good happens, I don't really celebrate that much. I'm just kind of all right, cool, that's cool. So Anyway, my point is, she's the one, when we started watching Knicks games together, she's the one who kind of was just like, this Obi guy's cool. Like, I love how he's very exciting. And then, and then maybe I showed her like a YouTube video or something of Obi just like signing autographs for everyone. But anyway, my point is, then came in Donte DiVincenzo, who at the time seemed kind of erratic on both sides of the ball. He's like turning it over and he's like out of position and, he's throwing it away like occasionally. And then, he's not really hitting threes either, which is what he was brought in to do. And then he becomes a starter. And his season entirely turns around. He immediately goes 4 of 8 from 3 against the Wizards. Then he goes 7 of 10 from 3 against the Hornets and drops 25 points. Incredible. But let me share some data with you. Donte DiVincenzo has made 234 3-pointers this season in 70 games. It's just about a top 50 season in terms of 3-point makes in NBA history. And obviously that's going to be always skewed towards, recent seasons when the 3-point influxes occurred, but still essentially a top 50 all-time season in 3-point makes. Again, he only averages 27 minutes per game. So on a 100 possession basis, Jeff, he is making 6.1 threes per 100. 6 3-point makes per 100 is elite company, especially when you play as much as DiVincenzo has. In NBA history, the players who have at least 6 threes per 100, who have played over 1,500 minutes, do you want to try to guess who these players are, Jeff? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 players that have done
4
this.
Players. What are the parameters again? They've made 1,500 threes.
6 threes per 100 and have played over 1,500 minutes in their season.
Oh, okay. So Steph.
6 times.
Yeah. Harden
has done it.
Klay Thompson.
3 for 3, Jeff. You're crushing it. The last one's gonna be a little tough.
Oh God. Is it? It's got to be recent as well, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Luka?
Relatively recently. Not Luka. Luka's not in. I don't know if Luka's been in the 5s, but no.
He's gonna do it this year, right?
No, he's not on pace right now. No,
but he's made more threes than Donte.
Yeah, but this is threes per 100 possessions, and Luka's played a ton of minutes.
I don't know who's the 4th. I'm blanking.
Duncan Robinson.
That makes sense.
Who also shot like 45% when he did it too, which is crazy. Yeah. But yeah, okay. The list is Steph Curry 6 times, Klay Thompson, Duncan Robinson, James Harden. And that's it. That's the full list of players who have made 6 threes per 100 while playing over 1,500 minutes in a season. If DiVincenzo can keep this up for at least the next dozen games of the season, he's going to be in that elite tier of 3-point shooting volume seasons of all time. Overall, he's shooting 40% from 3, 40% on catch and shoot threes, and 39% on pull-up threes on over 90 attempts. Not like he's not taking any pull-up 3 attempts. We know that he has, especially when Brunson has missed time. So high volume, high efficiency on every kind of 3-point shot, like historic levels of volume in terms of his ability to make these threes. I think it's the greatest, 3-point shooting season in Knicks history. It's not close. And honestly, one of the handful or bucketful maybe of great 3-point shooting seasons in NBA history.
It's also nuts. I'm looking at his game log. So you brought up that he started those 2 games at Washington, at Charlotte, but he actually went back to the bench for 7 games after that.
Yeah.
And then December 8th against Boston, he started every single game since. But here's the kind of interesting twist. He didn't play more than 30 games in any of these starts except for one. Like
30 minutes?
He didn't play more than 30 minutes his first 20 starts. His first 20 starts, he never played more than 30 minutes.
Wow.
He only played more than 30 minutes once. So even as a starter, and we know we talk about it a lot, how Tibbs likes to rotate, usually starters end up playing heavy minutes, but because of what was going on at guard, they had Quickly and they had Grimes and they had RJ Barrett, who I know he wasn't technically a guard, but he did affect DiVincenzo's ability to get minutes. DiVincenzo is kind of that token 5th starter who, as we've seen with Thibodeau, can be the odd man out. Like he's starting, but he's the guy who's not guaranteed to close games. And that really affected his minutes early on. And then even after the trade, they traded Quickly and RJ after that game on December 29th against Orlando. And he played a ton of minutes against Indiana. That was the 30-minute game. He played 36 minutes. He had a crazy game. He was 15 of 21, 7-11 of 3. They lost. He went back to not playing more than 20 minutes. Like he was still kind of the token fifth starter. The Brunson and Randle, they're always going to close games. OG Anunoby, Tibbs loved him from the get-go, as he should have. The centers, when Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein are both here, we're getting 48 minutes of rim protection. The point is those positions were locked in. Shooting guard was still the one that Tibbs was malleable with. And I'm saying all of this because you have to give credit to DiVincenzo for kind of hanging in there and taking this in stride and finding a way to be super valuable to the point where Tibbs couldn't deny him anymore. But then you also have to give Tibbs credit because, as we've seen recently, it hasn't just been DiVincenzo playing shooting guard. He's been playing some small forward next to the backcourt of Deuce McBride and Jalen Brunson. DiVincenzo's role has gotten more malleable as Tibbs has trusted him more. So I think that there's credit to go around here, and I think that that's playing a big part in DiVincenzo's success because we've talked about this many times. We talked about it with Obi Toppin. We're going to talk about it with Deuce McBride. You heard JJ Redick talk about it with Deuce McBride. Even NBA players need to develop a rhythm. They need to develop a consistency. It's hard to just go out there, not know how many minutes you're going to play, not know how long you're going to be out there, and just stay hot. That's a really hard thing to do. Obi Toppin's best minutes on the Knicks came when he knew what his role was. He knew one bad shot, he wasn't getting yanked. We're seeing it in Indiana now.
I was going to say this is the same situation in Indiana as well, but yeah, continue.
I think that DiVincenzo deserves a lot of credit for overcoming a slow start where people were like, all right, like, yeah, he's a nice bench piece, but is he even worth the small contract he gave? Now, you're saying it. This is the greatest shooting season we've ever seen from a Knicks. It's weird because I didn't feel that way when Fournier did his thing. Like, it definitely didn't feel like
Yeah.
it felt laughable to even compare him to like J.R. Smith's best shooting seasons.
Yeah.
It never felt that impactful. It was always just like, oh, he's playing a bunch of minutes because he's a starter for Tibbs and he's shooting a lot. This feels different. It feels more impactful. And maybe part of that is because he defends too. But this is one of the best contracts in the NBA right now. And, I wrote about it for Strickland the other day. Props to Tibbs, props to DiVincenzo, but it's just another tip of the cap for Leon Rose. What he's done in New York has just been excellent. Kind of went off the rails there, but the vibes are good in New York. So there's a lot of good things to say going around.
No, that was great. And I agree with all of that. And I think it's such a great point, multiple great points that you brought up. Yeah, I agree with you as far as didn't feel that way about 48 season. And that's why I think that there is some argument to have about this, whether this is the greatest 3-point shooting season in NBA history. I think there's no argument to have, not NBA history and Knicks history, but I think there's no argument to have about whether it's the best. So it's clearly the best. Like, I think that is just true. It could end now. Like, we could just end the season. Devo could play 70 games and it's the best Knicks shooting season in their history. Greatest
can you explain what to you the difference between best and greatest is?
Yeah.
Just for viewers and for my own sake, because sometimes that flies over my head.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's so greatest to me is like relative to not only to era, but relative to your contemporaries within a given season, especially if we're talking about greatness with regard to a season. It's always going to be, for me, with respect to like what other people did during that season, because that is kind of holding as much as possible all conditions equal, right? So we could say,
Babe Ruth is greater, Bonds is better.
I'm not even sure. Babe Ruth has to be greater. Yeah, relative to contemporaries. Yeah, that's definitely true. Yes. So Babe Ruth would be greater. Bonds is better. Because, you could say, oh, well, look at guys like Julius Randle and RJ Barrett's like amazing shooting seasons in the bubble. It's like, but everybody's shooting was up across the board for everyone, right? So like, that is going to mitigate how great those seasons are, but they can be like better seasons. You know what I mean? So that's the distinction to me. As far as like, so it's clearly the best based on just the numbers that I shared with you. It's the best, like almost objectively. Greater is harder, and you would have to kind of go back through and really parse apart some of the great Knicks shooting seasons in history, which some legwork I haven't done in detail, but I have done some cursory looking through, and it just, relative to what we're seeing in the league, I mentioned the 6 3-pointers per 100 on the volume of minutes that DiVincenzo has had. His 3-point volume with regard to attempts, 3-point shooting gravity. If you look at, you know, a website like B-Ball Index, he has one of the highest 3-point shooting gravities or off-ball gravities in the entire NBA. When you kind of put everything together, the prowess from both catch and shoot and pull-up shooting, I think it just is such a great season. And I think that just like, you just feel that. I think it's something that you feel and you sense with the eye test, the you know, the dreaded eye test. I think you sense some of that, and it's just supported by the data that we've seen. And I don't know, I think that to a lot of your points, as far as like getting in a rhythm, I just think I've always thought that mattered so much. And JJ Redick talked about it, and I've just always believed that. And I think some players are even more sensitive to that than others. I will say, I think there's value to players being able to be good without a rhythm. That's an intangible value that is really difficult to quantify. If you can have a player who I just bring off the bench for 15 minutes and they get 4 shots and they kind of are consistently themselves with that lack of a rhythm, so to speak, that has volume in of itself, because everybody can't play 35 minutes a game. You know, everybody can't get up 15 to 20 shots a game. But yeah, what do you think?
No, I was just, did you know that Steph Curry in 2015, 2016 shot 46% from 3 on 16 threes per 100 possessions?
Yeah, that's the greatest season I've ever witnessed. Yeah, I recall.
Yeah. I'm not as sure about that, but that was a really great offensive season. It's one of the greatest seasons I've ever witnessed. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I'm going to acknowledge like, you know, I think it's important. Like, we're all biased to some extent. So I'll acknowledge my bias there. That from a just enjoyment of basketball standpoint, that was the greatest season I've ever watched by far. Just seeing what Curry was able to do. I remember, I know this is a tangent, I'll give it back to you, but I just remember that the OKC game where Curry was just like going off, and I just knew, it's just like, you just knew it was going to happen. I was like, I was watching with my dad, and I was like, literally, he's going to get as far across half court as he can, like, to get an open look, but not any closer. So he's going to shoot from wherever they like let him shoot from, and he's going to make it. And he just crossed half court. It's like, yep, he's going to pull it from there. And yeah, he's going to make it. It was just like, it was just inevitable. It was so obvious it was going to happen. And he did that repeatedly throughout the course of the season. It was just ridiculous.
So if you watch that clip from the back, first of all, you see Cantor like knows it's in before, like right when Curry's allowed to shoot an open shot, he's like, what the fuck? He's so annoyed already. I was with my
good old freedom, but yeah,
I was with one of my closest friends in downtown Milwaukee, and he's a huge basketball fan. He almost walked on to University of Wisconsin's team like 10 years ago. He was like the last cut his freshman year. And then, so yeah, he's a big basketball fan. We were out at this bar called The Harp. I remember exactly where I was standing. And it was like, you remember being like young. You remember those days, right, XJ? Like, it was like
a long time ago, vaguely.
When you could stand being around a lot of people, and like alcohol was flowing, and we're just surrounded by people trying to be social. And this bar had the game on the TV, and I'm like standing in the middle of a bunch of people in Milwaukee, forcing everyone around me to just pay attention to this game. I'm like, you guys don't understand. Like this is the most ridiculous game I've ever seen. And so like, there's like half the bar is like dancing and being normal and social. And then me and my friend and like 20 strangers are all just eyes glued to this basketball game. And we all just went fucking nuts. It's one of the craziest, like, insane. Definitely one of the craziest. I mean, Game 6 of 2013 finals will always be number one. Everyone remembers where they were for that. That'll always be the number one viewing basketball. Maybe
for a regular season game, though.
Yeah, for a regular season, that's far and away. I somehow am ignoring 2016 Game 7. 2016 Game 7 and 2013 Game 6 I don't see how any basketball games will ever top those 2 games. Those are just, but for a regular season game, that's as good as it gets. Back to DiVincenzo. DiVincenzo's 15 threes per 100 possessions attempting. That's a lot. He's shooting 40% on those. So like you can't look, you can shoot a high percentage and you can shoot a lot of open threes. You can, Steve Novak was an elite shooter. That was an elite shooting season. But because of Novak, the way Novak profiled, he was shooting a lot of open threes. There were not a ton of contested threes because, simply put, he couldn't do that. He didn't shoot much off the move. It was a lot of them were off the catch. The one season or the one player I can think of, and you can fact check me on this, I don't know. I would bet that Starks had multiple seasons where he attempted double-digit threes per 100. And I would bet relative to his peers, that was ridiculous. Like so if we're talking greatest, if you're a guy who in 1995 or 1996 or 1997, one of those years, I think it was like, God, I'm just trying to picture his Basketball Reference. I'm pretty sure in like 95 and 97, those would be my 2 guesses. In 95 and 97, Starks had crazy outlier, like 3-point attempts per 100 seasons. And I think he shot pretty good efficiency in both those seasons too.
Well, 94, 95, so 94, 95.
Right. And then 96, 97, because 94, 95 is when they moved it in.
I was going to say that. Yeah. Okay. So so you're right. Yeah. A lot of people had outlier shooting seasons because of that.
But then he did in 96, 97 when they moved it back. And I think that season would be pretty outlier, a pretty strong across the league. I could be wrong about that.
I don't think I'm not looking at the comp right now relative to the rest of the league, but it's not an outlier season for him. So I'm assuming it's not necessarily an outlier season with regard to the rest of the league. And he only shot 37%, which is obviously really, really good for that time. But it doesn't just like strike me as like a crazy shooting season.
Man, you don't think? I mean, I would really love to dive more into that because
we would have to dive into it. Yeah,
1997. I have to imagine you just said 11. I think 11 3. That has to be a pretty strong.
Wait, what did I say?
Didn't you just say he averaged 11 threes per 100?
No, that'd be crazy. Yeah, that would have been. We're talking about 98, 99, right?
No, 96, 97.
Oh, 96, 97. Yeah. 5.3 per game. I don't know what the per.
How many threes per 100 possessions did Starks attempt?
93, 97. 3-point attempts per game. I mean, 90.
This is good content right here.
This is terrible because I'm having trouble looking at the per 100. What's the season again? Here's the last time. What's the season again?
96, 97. John
96, 97. 10.6 per 100.
Okay. We found it. I would imagine that's a pretty strong outlier. That feels like a lot to me. And so
the next season he did 9.9. So,
but Starks in general was an outlier. That's kind of my point. He was a pioneer. Yeah. Am I the first person to ever refer to John Starks as a pioneer? He was a pioneer of his time.
Yeah. Keep going.
So I don't know. I could see that being close. Starks is awesome. I have a bias. Starks is awesome.
Yeah. We'd have to dive into it. I doubt that that's as impressive as Donte's season this year, but I could be wrong, of course.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention is we're talking about his shooting, but his overall play has been incredible, like completely underrated in terms of his overall play this year, and how perfect the complement he's been to Brunson in their starting lineup. Just a couple of data points. He's 90th percentile in offensive EPM, 90th percentile in offensive EPM, 85th percentile in overall EPM. It's not just EPM. We talk about EPM a lot. He is 90th percentile in O LeBron. So 90th percentile in EPM, offensive EPM, 90th percentile in O LeBron, 89th percentile overall LeBron. Also, he is 27th in the NBA in box plus minus, which is Basketball References all in one stat. And it's a pretty solid one, given that it really it weighs box score stats a little more heavily than the other ones do. This is 27th in the NBA in overall BPM, which is in the same range as Scotty Barnes, Lauri Markkanen, and Anthony Edwards, and solidly ahead of Devin Booker and Tyrese Maxey. I mean, obviously, I have to point out that BPM likes his defense a little more than the other all-in-one metrics, and that's probably because he gets a lot of steals. As I said, it weighs box score stats a little more heavily. But regardless, his play, his overall performance this season has blown away my wildest expectations for Donte DiVincenzo.
And like, people need to understand that, like, when you reference that, you're not saying that he's better than Devin Booker or Anthony Edwards. That's not what that stat's saying. It's not. The reason it's impressive isn't because, holy shit, is Donte DiVincenzo a better basketball player than Devin Booker? It's if Donte DiVincenzo's impact is around the same level as Devin Booker, even across different roles, that's really, really good. No, he can never do what Devin Booker can do. But if they're providing similar levels of impact, like the only time it's you want to compare these stats with is if the roles are similar. So like it would be useful, and I'm not saying what you were referencing isn't useful. I'm just saying it would be useful as a direct comparison if you were comparing Donte DiVincenzo to, like, God, I'm going to say his name for the second straight week, but for some reason I can't think of anybody else. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That would be a useful comparison. If Donte DiVincenzo has a higher BPM, EPM, LeBron than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he has been better than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope because they play very similar roles. Like that, I'm not saying it unilaterally. Like, I'm not saying that means that he's going to be better next season or he was better last season. But for across this subset of games, it is very likely that Donte DiVincenzo would be better than somebody in his role if those analytics reflect that. So what XJ isn't trying to relay is that Donte DiVincenzo is better than Devin Booker at basketball. He's just saying, like, holy shit, his level of impact this season in his role has been on par with Devin Booker's level of impact in Devin Booker's respective role. That's super fucking impressive.
Yeah, and yes, that is largely what I'm trying to say. I also think there is some value to kind of comparing players across in different roles using some of these data. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm discarding it in that way. Actually, I think there is some value to being able to say, like, that. I mean, that's what an all-in-one metric does, and that's kind of like the reason why it's flawed, right? It's because it is trying to do that. It is trying to say, in a vacuum, this guy adds more value than this other guy. Like, that is what it's trying to do. And so by doing that, it ends up being internally flawed, but also it is trying to compare them across roles.
It's just tough because, like, if you take like a super role player like Derek White, and then you take a subpar primary initiator, God, I'm going to piss people off with whoever I say this. Let's say like Cade Cunningham. I love Cade.
Yeah.
Like the all-in-one data would say that Derek White's better than Cade Cunningham this season. And I would agree with that. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. It's just the lines get blurry, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, for sure.
There is a line where the role, the difference in role matters so much that the analytics can't possibly capture that. Where that line is and deciphering where that is what smarter people than I do. Like that's what they're paid to do. And I'm just saying, for people like us who are trying to decipher that, I certainly don't. I don't think you would claim to. I just think it's tough to draw that line in the sand.
Yeah, very difficult. And there's actually no clear way to do that. And that's why we have our discussions about, is the best role player as valuable as the best, primary initiator, and all those things. Those are all up for debate and things that are not solved or settled. So for sure, that's true.
But there is a line, like if you take OG Anunoby, we had this conversation a few weeks ago. Who is the best initiator that you would still take OG Anunoby over to start a team? It's an interesting discussion. I don't think DiVincenzo's on that level. Do you?
No, I don't think he's on that level. No, but
he's been the fact, like, what's cool about it is DiVincenzo and OG Anunoby, within the wide blanket of role player, like that being their role, they actually are different types of role player, which makes their interactivity even better. Like, we talk about the clone theory a lot. If you cloned OG Anunoby and just had two of them, that'd be awesome. But there would be a little bit of diminishing returns, like, because they're exact clones. And I would argue that because DiVincenzo is slightly different than OG Anunoby, that actually might make up for the small or the impact gap between DiVincenzo and OG Anunoby's, the clone of OG Anunoby's impact, if that makes sense.
I
You might not
would
agree, but I hope it makes sense.
Yes, I was gonna say I don't agree, but it makes sense. Yeah, so I will. Oh, I think OG is significantly more impactful enough than DiVincenzo, where such that that aspect that he's adding doesn't create enough makeup value. But I totally hear what you're saying. Wait, you want to respond to that?
Well, this is just interesting to me, and I think we should talk about it a little bit more because
Yeah.
the way I'm viewing it is in DiVincenzo, you have a movement shooter. You have someone who can run around the arc. Like Anunoby, his clearly most valuable shot is the corner three when he's standing there.
If we're just talking about on offense, then I would.
I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about everything. So I'm going to get to both sides of the ball.
Okay.
DiVincenzo is a little bit better at attacking closeouts. I think Anunoby is more of a connective passer, whereas DiVincenzo is more of a threat attacking closeouts. So in theory, if you had two OG Anunobys on the wing, relative to having one OG Anunoby and one Donte DiVincenzo, not only are you diversifying your offense and your scheme more because you have one who's kind of a standstill guy and one who's roaming around the perimeter, you also are attacking all three levels more because Anunoby is purely, I'm going to shoot, or if I get an easy attack of a closeout, I'm going to get to the basket. But that's really it. Like he's not, I don't love him pulling up from 15 feet. I don't love any of that. Whereas DiVincenzo, even inside the arc, is, and we've talked about it, he's bad. He's bad at the rim. But I do think that because of his vertical gravity and what he tries to do, he does keep the swing passes going in the way he attacks the rim better than Anunoby. So again, I'm just talking about diversifying your offense. I think that having a DiVincenzo with an Anunoby does that better. And then defensively, of course, DiVincenzo, the overall impact isn't near what OG Anunoby does, but I do think at the point of attack, specifically against guards, you do allow yourself to have a better combination. Like if the Knicks were to play the Nuggets, for example, I would prefer to have, well, of course you'd prefer to have Deuce, but when the Knicks are healthy, Deuce won't be in the starting lineup. I personally would prefer to have DiVincenzo at the point of attack and then OG Anunoby roaming off ball, then OG Anunoby at the point of attack and OG Anunoby off ball. Obviously OG Anunoby twice would be elite, but I actually think DiVincenzo with OG Anunoby is a little bit better versus that specific thing. There are going to be plenty of combinations where two OG Anunobys is just way better.
Yeah, it's a totally valid argument. I hear what you're saying. I just think that OG is so much better defensively than DiVincenzo. Like it's like I think that OG is potentially is the most impactful non-center defender in the NBA. And just that value that he provides to you, even just off ball, is too much for DiVincenzo to. So if we're comparing them as offensive players, I would take DiVincenzo over OG Anunoby like pretty easily, and if just on that side of the ball. But the other side is like there's not even a conversation to me to be had. And I hear what you're saying as far as defending smaller, quicker guards on the perimeter. Maybe DiVincenzo's like a little better there, but like not sufficiently enough to like even come close to the impact that OG provides in every other aspect of defense. And so to me, it's like, would I rather have like OG and Deuce McBride or OG DiVincenzo and like somebody else? Like
it's funny that you say that because my next thought was going to be, well, if you have two OGs, Randle doesn't need to be there. Like,
yeah, exactly.
God, he's always the odd man out. But it does free you up to play. It does free you up to play Deuce McBride in a way that having DiVincenzo doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just have Brunson, Deuce, two OG Anunobys in a center.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, you're not going to score. I'm like, nobody's going to score. Like everybody's going to have 80 points and the Knicks will have sufficient offense to like, I just think that's completely and utterly dominant. And the other situation is like one that we'll actually hopefully be able to actually see play out on the court, which I think is going to be,
it's been dominant.
That's why I used the modifier of utterly.
Yeah, that's nice.
I just think it'll be better. I think it would be better, but obviously this is a theoretical conversation. But yeah, I just want to say I hear what you're saying, and I think that there's total validity to it. I just don't agree.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're even able to have the conversation speaks to how good Donte DiVincenzo has been this year, which is completely absurd that we're even able to put him in this conversation.
There are only 5 non-centers who have a higher defensive EPM than OG Anunoby this season. So like clearly he's in the conversation.
Yeah. And you know, given his start with with Toronto, which it's been posited that not that he was mailing it in, but you know, like he wasn't giving it everything he had to some extent. It just I don't even really use that with regard to my view of OG Anunoby's impact. I mean, I think the best sense we get from his impact are, you know, is last season, which he played an entire season for him with 67 games at 36 minutes per game and had a plus 3.3 EPM, which is 99th percentile in the league. And, you know, that's a full sample of a full season of games for OG Anunoby on the defensive end. And his impact was that on par with some of the best rim protectors.
I wonder if the Knicks are worried at all about the injury stuff. Like not even just for the season, just long term. He's really never
in terms
been
of
healthy.
re-signing him.
Yeah, he's just really never been healthy, ever. That 67 game season is the most he's ever played since his 20-year-old season.
It's like so funny because the commentary is always like his injuries are kind of like freak injuries, like things that just like are random things that happen, not like, you know, soft tissue injuries or wear and tear injuries, like, you know, something like Isaiah Hartenstein's dealing with. They've always been just like random occurrences. And even this one feels like one, but I think at some point, if you just are continually getting injured, like, I don't know, maybe you're predisposed to these random occurrences to some extent. Like it's hard to just, if it just continually happens, it's hard to say it's random and we wouldn't expect it to happen anymore. At some point, I don't know what that point is, but yeah, I think it's a valid concern, at least in terms of signing him to $40 million a year for the next, you know, 4 years or whatever the contract may be.
And again, like I brought this up when we traded for him. If I'm Daryl Morey, I'm offering him more. To be honest, I'm offering more. I'm getting a meeting, and you agree that OG Anunoby is the perfect player to stick in between Maxey and Embiid, right?
Yeah, literally the most perfect, like the most perfect player you could construct. Yes.
Yeah. And so you know that OG Anunoby and Embiid are friends. Like that's a thing. That's part of the reason why Knicks fans were excited about OG Anunoby coming, because it's like, oh, if the Knicks need another star, they've got another way to recruit Embiid, and that could be the final piece. Well, it could work the other way too. Like Embiid could. And so if you're the Knicks and OG Anunoby's like, hey, the Sixers are offering me 4 for $200. What are you going to do? Like, if I'm Morey, I would do that. I don't. You make a rival worse, and you give yourself real title equity. I don't understand why the Sixers wouldn't do that. They have the most cap space of any team this season. They can offer OG Anunoby. Obviously, the Knicks can offer more. I think they can offer.
They have his bird rights, so they can offer him the most.
Yeah. Offer him an extra season. I've always found that to be super overrated, though, because if you're OG Anunoby, unless you plan on retiring, like in that gap, if you think there's a chance you retire, you're always gonna get paid.
You're just talking about injury concerns. Like, you don't think he has he has his own injury concerns about himself? Like, I'm sure going through that constantly, it's like, damn, I keep getting injured, bro. Like, what? Like, you know, you want to have that security long term.
You would. I'm just saying, if you're OG Anunoby, you should feel pretty confident that you're going to get paid in that 5th season regardless. So I'm just saying the existence of the 5th season alone isn't super valuable to me. Now, if the Knicks are like, we'll match the money per season and give you a 5th season, of course, then in that instance, it's a no-brainer and he's going to stay with the Knicks. I'm just saying, if the Knicks are like, we've got injury concerns, 4 for 160 or 5 for 200 is the most we're going to go. And then Daryl Morey's like, okay, we'll give you 4 for 190. To me, that's a no-brainer in OG's case to not stay with the Knicks. I'm not trying. I have no inside information. Yeah. I'm just saying, from a strategic standpoint, if you're Daryl Morey, how do you not offer this guy as much money as possible?
And Daryl Morey might, I think and you're bringing up a great point that I haven't heard really talked about at all. So I think it's totally worthwhile to bring up. It's just strange that it's just not a conversation point, but I do think the reason it's probably not a conversation point is just such a confidence in the CAA, like Knicks kind of situation, where I think there's just like this deep confidence that just they have an understanding and they're going to come to an agreement one way or another. Maybe that'll be contingent on what Philly offers. And if it's like, damn, the Knicks have to go higher, they just will then, they'll just match whatever they need to be able to like move forward. And it's not going to be as much as Philly would pay, but maybe it'll be more than they want to. But regardless, they're going to sign him for whatever the cost is.
And to be clear, they should. Like the Knicks,
yeah.
That's the thrust of my point. You were saying the injury concerns might give them pause on 4 for 160. They've put themselves in a place where they have to give him whatever he wants. And so if he does have another suitor that's like, we're giving you 4 for 200, I'm sorry, you have to. And if that means, Julius Randle might not get what he wants, like that's this team next season without OG Anunoby is not close to a title contender. They need OG Anunoby. What they're doing right now is super admirable. Jalen Brunson's amazing. He deserves MVP votes. Deuce McBride, Donte DiVincenzo, as we just talked about. They have a lot of good players. OG Anunoby is the piece. I don't know about you. I think this team is a title contender with just OG Anunoby returning. A fringe title contender. But like not on Boston or Denver's level. But like
I think you mean everyone healthy besides Julius Randle.
Yeah. I think they can push Boston. I think they'd win like 20% of the time, 30% of the time. But I think that they have a real chance. And I don't know how much better those odds get when Julius Randle comes back. That's how malleable and valuable I think OG Anunoby is. It's not saying anything about Julius Randle. I just think that what he brings is almost entirely diminishing. And
well, yeah, that's exactly what it's saying about. You said it's not saying anything about Julius Randle, and then you explained how it is saying something about Julius Randle.
Yeah, it is. It's a weird thing, man. He's just in that level of player where it's impossible. Like the Knicks almost did the best you could in 2020, 2021 to build a team around Julius Randle as the best player. And it's just hard. He's just in that level of player where it's hard to make a team built around him that can truly contend. But he's made it very clear that he's not the most additive player around a better player, next to a better player. So I just think that if you bring back OG, they have enough shooting, they have enough initiation, they have enough defense, that what Julius Randle is going to bring is mostly a second creator, a tertiary creator to give Jalen Brunson a breather sometimes, that's kind of, I don't mean to diminish Julius Randle's individual. I'm just speaking about his role on this team and his impact on this team. I think OG Anunoby is much more important, and that's why they need to sign him no matter what this offseason.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. I mean, it's unfortunately in this conversation topic, it's a little bit preaching to the choir for both of us here, because I think we just have a very similar perspective on it. And yeah, I think so too. I also agree. I don't know that their chances are a lot better to beat the Celtics with or without Randle. To me, their chances are contingent on the health of OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein. And if those two guys are fully healthy, and obviously the rest are, like insofar as they can be, I point to those guys specifically because they've been the ones with the health issues recently. If those two guys are healthy,
can I make two? I'm going to make two devil's advocates points just to spur this conversation along, so it's not just the two of us freaking agreeing with each other. That's boring.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So two things I think Julius Randle does specifically against the Celtics that are valuable, super valuable, and uniquely valuable. Yes, in a vacuum, Julius Randle is a slightly worse initiator than Jalen Brunson. So his initiation, by definition, is slightly diminishing, because it's like when you increase when you input Julius Randle's usage, you're removing some Jalen Brunson usage. So in a vacuum, that would seem to be slightly negative, but it's a different type of initiation. It's a different type of initiation that forces different types of defense, and it forces different defenders to expend energy and to be involved in different types of actions. If you're a smart team like Boston, who has two elite guard defenders in Derek White and Drew Holiday, and the opposing team has Jalen Brunson and that's it, it's going to be easier for you to construct a consistent defensive scheme because you're just trying to take away one guy. Whereas when you have to account for Julius Randle and all of a sudden you're introducing Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and even Kristaps Porzingis into the mix, they're going to get switched on to Julius Randle. They have to be a part of the scheme. This is multiple levels of scheme. This is multiple types of schemes. So even if in a vacuum, the output says that Jalen Brunson is better and that just him going over and over again would be better, I think you could argue that against Boston specifically, it's better to have versatile types of initiation. And then the second thing is from a lineup construction standpoint, I think the existence of Julius Randle allows Tom Thibodeau to have 5 players out there. I know he likely won't do it, but just the option I do think is there whereas it wouldn't be there. Like if the Knicks are just getting killed by Porzingis as a stretch 5 and Julius Randle didn't exist, I think Tibbs would just get killed by it and would do nothing. I don't think he'd ever play OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Donte DiVincenzo, Deuce McBride.
Yeah.
Whereas with Julius Randle, I think if, like, let's say they played the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals and they have Julius Randle and games 1 and 2 in Boston, they just get slaughtered and they're just getting 3-point nuked to death. I could see Tibbs with Randle being like, all right, we just got to try Randle, OG, Hart, DiVincenzo, and Brunson. We just got to try it. And so I think that there's intrinsic value there in Julius Randle's presence that wouldn't be captured by impact data.
Yeah, those are great points. I think they would. That's a typo. I think they would be captured by impact data, but I think those are great points. The 4-5 alignment, I agree, would be a major consideration. I guess I'm underrating the idea that they would ever go to it. And maybe Tibbs would go to it. So and you're right. It's not a possibility if he's not there, obviously. But yeah, I guess I just don't think I can't imagine a circumstance where
I'll make a bold statement with you. I know you're not a big bettor. So I'll bet you a meal, just the price of a meal.
That's fine. Yeah, I'll do that.
If the Knicks play Boston in the playoffs this season and Randle's healthy, I think he's a favorite to eventually go to it. I think we will see it.
When you say go to it, you mean for like 5 minutes?
I know this is the game. I don't have a solid barometer for what go to it is, but it won't be like Tibbs going to Obi Randle in the 2021 playoffs.
Yeah, it's just not sufficient if you don't like it. You need to have possessions to accumulate possessions for it to matter. You can't just go to it for like, hey, we went to it and immediately it worked. Like things don't work that way. Like you need possessions to accumulate for us to see like the relevant impact on a series. Like, so I'm not going to say they won't go to it for like 4 or 5 minutes at some point, but like, that's just like, to me, that's like negligible. That's like,
yeah. So I'm taking it a step further and I'm saying, I think he'll go to it for an amount of time that you'll find reasonable.
Wow.
I think his hand will be forced and I think he'll go to it.
Wow. I'll take that. I'll take that bet.
Cool.
I hope we get to see it. That'd be amazing. I hope this comes to fruition.
I don't know. I've got faith in Tibbs. I mean, he's playing Deuce at 2.
You know what?
DiVincenzo at 3.
This is a perfect segue because this is the last thing I wanted to, that we wanted to talk about before we move to our second part of the pod, which is, this is the perfect segue. Talking about the Knicks small starting lineup. I would have never thought Tibbs would do this. I don't know about you, but yeah, maybe I'm underestimating Tibbs now. The fact that they've gone to this lineup where their second tallest player is 6'4" and their average height is under 6'5". I haven't looked into this and I'm just not going to. Probably one of the smallest starting lineups run out this year by any team. I would have to imagine it's like up there. And I don't know. Like, I never could see this coming. When the Knicks were running out there like Precious at the 4 lineup, and okay, at least I'll speak for myself. You can speak for yourself. I was frustrated because I believe it's just bad practice to have such a poor shooting lineup out there. I firmly do not believe that you can make up for what you lack in space by crashing the boards with your 4 and 5. Yeah, I just don't think that's an effective way to win basketball games long term in the modern NBA. But a lot of people were strong proponents of it, and they were pointing to this insane net rating over a very small sample, and specifically the lineup I'm talking about: Brunson, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Precious Achiuwa, Isaiah Hartenstein. And so now we've seen, before Tibbs shifted away from it, we saw that net rating of that group kind of shrink significantly. And they're still good because of the hot start when it was like a ridiculous number. But as sample grew and teams recognized how they needed to play it, the red hot offense with that lineup, which was built almost entirely on offensive rebound, it came back to earth. It's still a plus 6.8 per 100 over 360 possessions, which would be the 63rd percentile for 5-man lineups per clean the glass. So still a better than average 5-man lineup in terms of its effectiveness. But again, a lot of that is weighted by the hot start. Now this smaller lineup of Brunson, McBride, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, and Isaiah Hartenstein over another small sample is plus 39 per 100 over 154 possessions. Obviously, that is 99th percentile for all 5-man lineups. This lineup is crushing teams by even more than that other lineup was when people were really big proponents of it in over a similarly small number of possessions. So, for me, I kind of dismiss all lineup data that's 5-man lineup data that is like such few possessions, but it's doing better than that other one was. And I think I think that it's a much more kind of potentially viable way to play, even though I think that it has a lot of flaws. One of them being that Josh Hart is not really a spacer. He's an active spacer, not a passive spacer. But I think it's more viable than the opposite. And I think it's just so interesting that Tibbs went in this direction and has stuck with it against the Denver Nuggets when both you and I said we wouldn't have done it. He just did it anyway. It didn't necessarily work out, but that lineup did perform okay. So I think it's just amazing, and I just wanted to talk about it for a second.
Yeah, it's super awesome that he's willing to do it. I'm looking through the lineup data right now, and the lineup of Brunson, DiVincenzo, Grimes, OG Anunoby, and Hartenstein, which is a super viable lineup, way more viable than the Precious at power forward lineup.
Yeah.
Played 1 minute, and it has a 300 net rating. That's
played
fun.
1 minute.
How did it only play 1 minute? I don't understand. Those guys were all healthy. How did those 5 never play together? That's such a good lineup.
That sounds like it was like the half was about to end, and he brought in Brunson for for the last play of the half, and they hit a 3, and it was like, yep, that's it.
I'm really glad for both Tibbs and for the Knicks, and honestly for Deuce as well, that he's going to this. What else is there to talk about besides just it's awesome to see and that it's playing really well, and it's not surprising that it's playing really well. The Precious thing was a joke. I'm sorry. It was just, I can't believe that there were people who defended that. That was ridiculous. If you can't see the difference between Josh Hart and Precious Achiuwa at power forward, Josh Hart is 2 for his last 28 from 3. But and in the good lineups he plays in, and we talked about this last week, when Josh Hart, like let's say you put Josh Hart on the court at small forward, and he's on the court with DiVincenzo, Brunson, Randle, and Hartenstein, Hart's going to get ignored much more heavily. That's when the issue is going to flare up, when he's playing small forward or God forbid shooting guard. If he's playing,
can I ask you real quick on that, Geoff? Mm-hmm. If they did the same Precious Hartenstein, but instead of Josh Hart, it was Deuce McBride, how would you feel about that? So Brunson, Deuce, DiVincenzo, Precious, and Isaiah Hartenstein.
It would still be close to untenable for me. They don't even Precious Achiuwa gets ignored in a way that Hart doesn't, because the teams not only don't care about him shooting or spacing, they don't care about him being open and dribbling into the paint. They care more about Josh Hart doing stuff
Yeah.
inside the arc.
Yeah, that's
He gets
fair.
ignored in a very unique way at power forward. And the Knicks don't remember last season. This is something I found fascinating. When the Knicks played Jericho Sims at power forward, and they figured out that Warriors action where the defenses would ignore Jericho Sims, and Jericho Sims would
Dribble
get the ball
handoff.
and dribble into a handoff, and his defender would be nowhere near the guy, so the Knicks guards would get lots of open threes. Precious Achiuwa never did that. I don't get why they didn't try that when he was playing power forward. That was a really good counter that was available to them that they just never tried.
I want to say they did it a couple. For some reason, I'm vaguely remembering them like Precious doing dribble handoffs a couple times, but maybe he was playing the 5. I'm not sure, but I know he's done it, but maybe not in that alignment.
He does dribble handoffs sometimes, but what I'm saying is
when they give him the space. Yeah.
When the defender is exaggerating playing off him, he gets a kick out. One thing Jericho Sims did really well was he would realize, like, okay, I'm not going to drive, and they're just leaving me here. Okay, I'm just going to dribble it back to the guy who passed to me, and that guy's going to get wide open three. I'm saying that specific action
as a way to attack the space that they're giving. Yeah,
Draymond Green does it all the time. It's why he's so good in that role, where you see Draymond Green all the time get post ups. And you're laughing at the defense guarding him 15 feet from the basket. It's like, why are you guarding him so close? It's because if you don't guard him close, some Steph Curry or Klay Thompson is going to run behind Draymond Green, and Draymond Green's going to dribble into a handoff and create a wide open three for an elite shooter. So that's why that play is so tough, even though Draymond Green isn't much of a threat from 15 feet.
And they did it. The Knicks did it with Sims in the preseason too. I mean, recall this year, the dreaded, wait, are they going to play Sims at the 4? Like the uproar about that. And they did do that as like a counter to deal with the way that teams would play Sims, even in the preseason. They were doing like, okay, Sims has the ball with a ton of space, do a dribble handoff. Nobody can recover because it's literally like 2-on-1. So yeah, I don't know why they didn't do it. It's a good question.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where I don't want to be down on Tibbs, but because I think he deserves Coach of the Year votes. So I have no interest in being down on Tibbs overall. But the thing that always grated me about the Precious thing is it just runs so counter to how I view things. It clearly was Tibbs saying, how can I best scrape away at these minutes where my team is very the team is weak, there's injuries, who gives me the best chance, what skill set can I most rely on in these minutes? And the way I would view things is I would have viewed those minutes as more experimental, and I would have been like, what is most likely to matter when the minutes matter? And so like you would have seen more Bojan at the 4 because, hey, let's just see, like Bojan's played 4 in the past. Is it possible that now that he's slower and he's lost a step, he's actually more of a power forward because you want him on a slower defender. You don't want him on, a quicker wing. You want him to play power forward. Might that hurt our rebounding? Maybe. And I'm not saying there's no viability to what Thibodeau did. I just think that it was one of those decisions where it was questionable in the short term, clearly, because Precious Achiuwa's offense at power forward is so harmful. And long term, it just made no sense. There was nothing the Knicks gained there. So it was just basically useless minutes from a long-term perspective because he's never going to play an important second of basketball at power forward. They were never going to replicate that lineup ever in a minute that mattered. So you pretty much have to say, I know for a fact that this gives the Knicks a slightly better chance of winning in the short term. And okay, I'm fine if you or if I want to defer to Tibbs in that regard, because clearly he's proven himself to be a solid enough not solid enough, that sounds patronizing, an elite schemer and game planner to the point where if he's going into a game and he's saying, you know what, I just think Precious at power forward gives us the best chance of winning tonight, he deserves the benefit of the doubt. But he has to be right because you're just disregarding any long-term ramifications.
Yeah, I largely agree with you. And you kind of walked yourself into sort of what my perspective has become on it, which is long-term, yes, it has no value at all. Like it's useless long-term. We agree on that. short term, actually Tibbs's willingness to pivot away from it actually justified it to me, because it showed me that he was doing it because he thought it would work, it would keep them afloat, and it kind of did. Like teams were just like, what is this? How do we guard a person who is at this position, who normally there's a guy who makes these corner threes and this person has like no chance to make, or a 28% chance to make them. And it worked, it was effective, and then it got exposed, really really egregiously by Philadelphia, and then he just stopped doing it. He was like, yeah, it's out, it's exposed, this doesn't give me the best chance to win anymore, and now I'm going to pivot to something else. And because he was so willing to pivot from it so readily, once it was like exposed, like fully, like just like the pants were down and it was just like, yeah, this is not going to happen anymore, everybody's going to play it this way. Once that happened, he was just like, yeah, I'm going to go to something else that I think will give me the best chance to win in the short term. And he just did it, and he hasn't gone back to it. So to me, that pivot really kind of justified it as like Tibbs had this, he thought this was their best chance to win. It kind of worked. As soon as it was just clearly not going to work, he just stopped doing it, which I think is fair. I think that I give me, XJ gives Tibbs that credence to be able to kind of go with that, thinking it's going to work. It kind of did work, didn't work anymore, and then he just said forget about it, we're not doing it anymore.
Yeah, the only problem with your analysis there is that the underlying implication is that he couldn't have gotten to this conclusion with Bojan at power forward. And so, in my opinion,
if it didn't work, if Bojan
didn't work, you're basically the underlying implication that you're making is that if he played Bojan at power forward and it didn't work, we wouldn't have gotten to a point where it was like, okay, Deuce at shooting guard is the best solution.
I'm saying that he's going with what he thinks would work. So that is based on his own like predilections. Mm-hmm. Like he's thinking this, he doesn't think, I'm putting myself in Tibbs's mind. He didn't think that the Bojan at the 4 thing would work as well as Precious at the 4. So therefore he's going to go with the thing that he thinks will work, the most likely to work. And if that doesn't work, then he'd pivot away from it. He's not going to go with a thing that he thinks is less likely to work to prove that to be true, and then pivot to something that he thinks is more likely to work, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And I'm just saying that if it's close and there is long-term viability to one, which I think Bojan at power forward had, even despite his struggles in New York, that just is the way I would lean. And that's how I think about things. And in my opinion, it would have been totally reasonable to be like, okay, well, the spacing isn't what's hurting us. It's Bojan's defense that's hurting us. How do we keep the spacing but infuse more defense? Oh, we just put Deuce in and slide Josh Hart to power forward. I think he could have gotten there anyways, and we could have learned something about something that's potentially viable.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like we are in agreement on it from both of our perspectives being similar, but I think that there's validity to the perspective of I don't care whether it's short, like long term going to help, because I think that I have a 5% better chance of winning with this option. And yeah, it's close, but the what I'm going to make up on the back end of like what I could learn long term, like I just am not I'm not adding that into my calculus basically, which I think could be the perspective that he was bringing to that.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. That's totally reasonable.
Yeah, and this is all like we're speaking from trying to theorize what Tibbs could be thinking, but at least to me, like it's justified more that he didn't just like stubbornly stick to it, which would have been egregious to me. So,
yeah, I think the most important thing, and this is why I do believe that when it matters and if the situation calls for it, I think that this version of Tom Thibodeau will be open. And you know what helps? I know Hartenstein's been amazing this season, and he has. I still think in modern basketball, in today's day and age, with the way the style plays, I think you could still make the argument that the Knicks' 5 best players are, when healthy, is that small lineup. You know, it would basically come down to me, Hart versus Hartenstein. And in a total vacuum, of course, Hartenstein's been better this season. I'm not comparing their impacts this season. I'm just saying that I don't think it's completely unreasonable to say that Josh Hart is a better basketball player than Isaiah Hartenstein. Maybe you disagree with that, but and so I think that there's a world where Tibbs would be saying, yeah, I just want my 5 best guys out there versus the Celtics' 5 best guys. It helps in the Celtics case that their 5 best guys are like perfectly fitting and synergistic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that as we're learning, and as we posit in clone theory, that tends to help when the 5 best, your best guys all playing together do not have to kind of diminish themselves, or their play less than their optimal role is really how you get the best outcome from a team standpoint. And I disagree. I think that Isaiah Hartenstein is significantly better player than Josh Hart, but yeah, that's based on a year of sample, which is and spot minutes here and there throughout their career. So yeah, it's hard to say. I do believe that though. I believe in the Isaiah Hartenstein defense. But yeah, it's a totally reasonable perspective to have.
You believe in it as being really good though, right? Like this will be the best defensive season of Isaiah Hartenstein's career. We both agree on that, right?
This will be the best with regard to impact data.
Yeah, just impact data.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. He's not gonna put up over a four defensive EPM. I mean, even I don't know, like Gobert will never do that again. You know what I mean? Like that's just the outlier season, no matter what.